Have to retrain, obviously.
Okay, cool. Okay.
We come to the Q&A section. Actually, we've gained a bit of time here, so we're going to have time for more questions from the audience. I'm going to ask whether we've got a roving. Yes, we have got roving mics. And I'm going to ask for someone to pitch the first question. If you want to ask a question, can you please say who you are and what your affiliation is? And either direct it to an individual or the whole panel so we can guide the question to the right place. So who's going to kick off? Ian.
Hello, Ian Nock. I'm the chair of the MMC who've put this on tonight, so maybe I should ask the first question. This one probably is more general, but it's more for those people who mentioned it, the creepy line. What are the key factors that define a creepy line? Because we all know, I think the creepy line is a little bit hard to determine where the line is. We definitely know what is totally creepy. We know what is totally not creepy, but where are we in the middle? And how do we define that? How do we define a creepy line?
Yeah, I mean, I think on the showing value to the consumer is not on the creepy line, but it's where you find things that have been used from completely unrelated services. So it's like when you browse for something or you buy something on one part of the internet and then 10 different parts of the internet are suddenly giving you the same, or using that data in order to present something to you, rather than within, let's say, the confines of a pay-TV service or an OTT platform where the data has been clearly used to benefit the individual. So where you've been reminded about the next episode of a show that you watch regularly, or a new movie is recommended to you that happens to be something that you like, it's clearly within using the data that you're using on that service in order to benefit the experience, rather than using data that should be unrelated to what you're doing on that platform.
Any other definitions?
Unrelated to broadcasting, Ian. I'm quite a binary person. I love something and then I suddenly realise I hate it. And for me, it was Alexa. Alexa crossed the creepy line. My fault for putting her in the bedroom with my wife and I. We were having a chat one night. And
Do we really want to know about this creepy line?
I was chatting to Sam one night, and then Alexa chimes in, "Do you want me to call the emergency services?" I said, "No, absolutely not. That's far too creepy." So we sent her back to Amazon. I don't like that sort of thing where the technology gets into my own life. I make up email addresses to register for broadcast services. I make up email addresses when I'm on the GWR train home to Falmouth. I don't want anybody to know what I'm doing. I just feel like that. It's all creepy to me.
Jamie, you seem to have defined a creepy line by deciding a sizing of your addressable advertising group, basically.
Yeah, good point, yeah.
I guess it's not a science, but what feels right and what adds value. And you need to keep degrees of separation in your data. So we do not share first-party data with anyone unless it's aggregated, anonymised and matched via a third-party escrow, whether that be online shopping, online browsing, or whether that be TV viewing. And so, what ostensibly feels right, if you're an intrinsically honest person, and I'm sure there are some that are not, rather, but you've got to follow the whole notion of doing the right thing, and without wanting to sound too cheesy, believing in better. Are you doing the right thing for your customer at the right time, and does it feel right? And are you adding value? It does not add value to take web browsing history, because Sky's a broadband customer, and apply that to viewing experiences. Viewing experiencing and viewing behaviour should be applied to viewing behaviour. Web browsing should stay with web browsing, and that's it.
So how do you square that with the fact that...
You might need to wait for a mic and...
Yeah, so I mean, how, given the, as consumer, everything else is individually personalised, personally advertised to us, all of the rest of our online experience is based on individual advertising, aren't you taking the hit for that expectation and receiving no reward? I mean, I'm quite surprised that your demographic is so wide that it wouldn't include financial, household income and things like that. Because how do I get any benefit if you don't know who I am? And
So-
everything else is personalised to me, and you're trying to lump me in with 5,000 other people.
Well, so I think there's a couple of things there. The first is that you need to think about the experience or mindset of a consumer when they are watching TV. It is generally a mutual viewing event. So we trade or we sell on household impressions. That's the first thing. The second thing is that not everything should be judged by the lowest common denominator. And if I or any other broadcaster applied standards that were suitable for online, we'd soon be churned away from and moved into another environment. And no matter what you say, I don't think it's acceptable. But to your point, you can, with only 2 elements of data from our customer relationship, overlay commercially available third-party data sets. So Experian are a well-known financial data and lifestyle data sort of profiling business that are regulated, that operate above the line, if you like, and they can create aggregated households that can include affluence or lifestyle statements or demographic profiles. But we still apply the same notion of 5,000 households, no matter how tightly targeted. Even McLaren had to widen their attributes to 5,000 households. That was a combination of affluence and postcodes. It still sold, weirdly, McLaren cars. They spent less on the campaign than the profit that they made from those cars. They've come back and booked second and third campaigns. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be relevant and optimal for that campaign.
So in which case you're not randomly putting people into groups of 5,000. You are personally targeting, or family level targeting.
So it's
which group of 5,000 you go into?
Yeah, so it
is on a personal level.
No, it's aggregated. So
yeah, but it's.
Well,
of course, you have to aggregate it for sales purposes. You couldn't sell. You can't go to McLaren and say, "Can I sell you an advert for Andy Wise?"
Well, in online, you don't have to aggregate it because you can have a single piece of creative served to a single household because it can be digitally creative optimized. So it is not comparable. But I think the point is, if you are a car dealership in Portsmouth, who was the very first advertiser on AdSmart, you can target to drive time to the Portsmouth Hendy Ford, it was, the Fiesta Flame, £8,995, electric mirrors, red and metallic paint. You can create a segment and profile that is relevant for them, that can add value, versus the competitive medium, which is local press and local radio. You can add value to that marketing campaign.
Okay. Sorry, can we remember to name ourselves and our affiliation, please, in your questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Alan Patrick, I'm from Dataswarm. We're a predictive analytics company. Since we mentioned Alexa, that was what was pinging me when you said that audio was a new game in town. I wondered if anybody had a thought about what Alexa and these devices will also, you described the digital back path, but I think they're going to be quite influential. I'd be interested to see your thoughts.
Yeah, Simon?
So is this on? Yes. So the issue I was trying to raise there is that obviously it's possible to present a selection of things on a screen, but if I actually ask for something, it's only got one hit. It has to go straight there. And I understand there's a lot of work being going on, for example, in terms of getting a hit, for example, for radio stations. So if I was to say in the UK, play me Radio 4, I'm left out the words BBC there. If I say play Radio 4, well, there are lots of Radio 4s in the world. So how do I actually determine which one is actually most suitable for somebody in that area? So, you can clearly see why there is a need to actually apply technology there to actually effectively predict what might be a problem. But you might like to listen to the Irish Radio 4. So how do I allow you to actually find those other services? So but with voice, you've only got one hit, or you could have multiple tries, but it gets very annoying. So.
These devices are owned by companies that are not exactly neutral in the game.
Well, of course, yes. I mean, maybe that's what I was trying to allude to in the end there. Well, I think the Stroger example is really quite interesting. But yeah.
Okay, any more at the back there?
I am David Short, also from the IET Multimedia Committee. There was a press report a few days ago about Google, I can't remember if it's Google or Amazon, but basically staff at the company were able to listen in, or it was revealed that staff at the company were able to listen in to conversations that people had had with their smart speakers, presumably for diagnostic purposes. And that was, the reaction seemed to be that was quite creepy. And my view is, rationally, you shouldn't be worried about the humans, because there aren't many humans at those companies. You should be worried about what the algorithms are doing, because they can track you and take, potentially, action that may not be favourable to the consumer. Why do you think it's the fact humans are listening in that was newsworthy in that case?
Peter?
Yeah, I mean, it could be down to that you don't want somebody else listening in to your conversation, as opposed to something impersonal listening in that's not judging what you're saying or what you're doing. I mean, obviously, for whether it's voice input or any other predictive analytics or machine learning, there generally has to be a process where you know what the outcome was in order to train the algorithm, just like in the example of the typewriter or the police van, that you have to have a source of truth in order to understand whether the algorithm and the model that you've trained is actually predicting the correct thing. So in the case of voice, you do have to have somebody that actually knows what's been said in order to know whether the algorithm, was it your voice to text which was incorrect, or was it the text to the intent of what was said that was incorrect, or was it the execution engine? And we knew fine well that you'd said Radio 4 and something else took that and decided the action that was going to be taken as a result. And there's various stages there, whether that's in voice or in anything else. You still have to have something. As consumers, we want the technology to work. If you constantly speak into something and it never gives you the right result, as in the very early days when voice came out, then people can get frustrated with it and never go back. The same evidence of whether it's ad buffering or buffering of content, then as people, the tolerance of failure or delay is less and less. And so you still need to have that ability that's accurate without going over the creepy line.
Yeah, I suppose I wasn't really questioning sort of the engineering rationale for doing it, because I take your point that you need some quality control. I was really thinking about the public perception, that people don't mind speaking to an inanimate device, but they do. They then become worried that maybe there's a human on the other end of it.
Well, David Short from the IET, thanks for providing the return path information at the beginning. Maybe it's cultural. Maybe we're English. Maybe we get a bit embarrassed about that sort of thing. Probably, in my wildest imagination, most of my phone calls are monitored by the government. If you were to slip in the words dirty bomb or enriched uranium or something, you might be surprised at the number of people that were suddenly listening to your conversations. So maybe it's culture, but maybe it's also ignorance, and sometimes ignorance is quite nice.
It's bliss, yeah.
Michael Secker from Gartner. So I was just thinking about this, and I think it's maybe the lack of choice or decision that's like, let's say, these voice-based Alexas. There's no choice or request of, do you want to submit a bug report, and what information do you want to provide? Like you might have with Microsoft Word, where it says, okay, you've experienced an issue, do you want to submit also a screenshot and these log details? I don't think that process
exists in Alexa.
Simon.
Can I?
Yeah.
Actually, I'm the proud owner of a Google Home device, and I've actually gone through that process. They do a bug report thing, and there's a sequence you can say, and then it actually files it and it passes it on to their engineers, and they will get back to you. So it's quite interesting. The thing that I find creepy about it, no one mentioned it so far, was the idea that it's continuously listening. Either a human or a machine. I mean, most of us think that you say the activation words and then it starts listening, and actually it captures what you want and then gives you an answer. So I think that for me is the creepy side of what you've said. The idea of continual monitoring. I mean, I was interested in your. I hate to say it really, but what happened in your bedroom? But
Just keep it between the two.
yeah, we will. But the idea, you must have said Alexa at some point, or something that caused it to wake up. That's fascinating.
Can I just ask, abuse my chair's position, as it were. Maybe this is directed at you, Peter. How do we trap algorithms that stereotype? And I don't mean in this context necessarily male-female stereotyping, but for instance, an algorithm that decides because I watch science fiction TV programming, I've got an interest in something else. How do you detect that the behaviour of an algorithm is being stereotypical?
Yeah, I mean, I think various different, obviously it depends on the data that the algorithms are using, and so some of them may be biased in some way. Like in a collaborative filtering, people who watch this also watch that. Then there is the potential, obviously, in that case, for some stereotypical behaviour to come into play. Or, again, some of that might be more, if it's on the general internet, then there's more danger there that people could spoof or attack that type of technique that's not so relevant within the TV space, because you're within a walled garden effectively, and we're within that controlled space, and you actually do know within certain levels of uncertainty that people are actually watching those two particular programs. And so I think it does depend on the algorithms that you're using, and that's why it's important to have a variety of different techniques. And if you are baking people into a corner, then you would, I think, soon discover that in lack of viewing behaviour. And so I think the data coming back on the viewing also informs whether you're being effective or not. And if you drive people into a corner, or you have that sort of stereotypical behaviour, then you wouldn't see the behaviours that you're attempting to achieve, which is, showing people value for money, increasing engagement, getting them to watch more channels, getting them to watch a wider variety of shows, because in general, the operator does not want to drive people into a corner. They don't want their subscription to be hanging by a thread of only one type of content. And so the evidence that whether that behaviour was happening or not would come back in that return path data.
Okay, sorry, you had a question right there. Yes, in the front. Yeah. I'm on the, okay. Can you go first?
Thank you. Brunella Longo, I'm a full member of the IET and data and IT consultant. And I have a question for all the members of the panel and the chair as well. And is how long do you think it takes, or how far are we from having a methodological standard for the measurement of online advertising? So a standard way to get these metrics right, possibly. And the second part of the other side of the coin of this question is, who do you think need more these metrics? who is much more in demand of having this metric for strategic, political, or commercial reasons? Is the agency, the third party, or is the advertiser, or is the broadcaster, the media company, the owner of the platform or the network? So, seeing the two sides of the coin.
Can you be a bit more precise about what
Yes.
kind of metric we're talking about? You
Well,
said methodological.
Standard, an industrial standard. I mean, in any medium, from newspapers, billboards, television, radio, newspapers, has reached a point in the hype of the audience measurement in which all these very chaotic cacophony, I would say, stakeholders have reached an agreement to make an industrial sector standard to have audience measurement. In the online world, it's taking, from my point of view, a very long period of time to get in there, and the fragmentation of methodologies, of course, reflect, but this is a personal opinion, the fragmentation of the internet medium, the internet channels, the opportunities through technologies. But is there anything else? Who needs this data? Is possibly the side of the coin that explains.
So we took part in a study also with MTM earlier on this year, and it was almost unilateral across Europe that as broadcasters and platforms that we needed to align standards because they are inconsistent. If you just take video advertising, for example, today, we could talk about online display for hours, but video advertising, there are a multitude of different measurements and currencies and standards. One big social media platform might charge for an ad if it's seen for a single frame or second. Another might charge if only a quarter of the screen is seen and for more than 2 seconds. That is nonsensical by any standards, and the people that need and should be demanding, I should say, greater transparency and standards are the advertisers, and some of them are. So Procter & Gamble, Unilever, a whole load of them are demanding standards on both view-through rates, visibility and viewability on screen, but also environments. One of the beauties of TV is that it's a regulated environment. We as an advertiser had to remove advertising from Facebook and YouTube because our brand advertising was surfaced in amongst inappropriate content of the worst kind, of the most dreadful, disgusting, hateful content. And we were still charged for it until we kicked up a fuss. And advertisers have been blindly accepting that because of the murky ecosystem that exists. We at Sky, in our advertising world, we only charge for an ad if it's viewed through at least 75%. If that's a typical 30-second ad, you're getting at least 19.5 seconds more than you would do on Facebook. We only charge if it's watched at normal speed, and we only charge if it's watched on full screen with the sound on, I should add. And we are encouraging our peers across the industry to adopt those same standards, and I think we're starting to build momentum. But until we have a world where there is absolute transparency, there are independent companies processing the data and the logs of all advertising platforms, then you will have companies that manipulate the data for their own personal benefit.
Simon, as a regulator, are you in search of this kind of industry agreement? Well, I guess in TV and...
Well, I can't comment on this particular space. It's not something that I personally have familiarity with. So.
Okay. Anyone else want to take a bite?
Yeah. Thanks. I did work for a little while. Anybody that works in online video will come across online video advertising. And I thought it was bad in the days when we had web server logs and CDN logs and trying to match those up. And then you add feedback from the beacons or the things inside the video player that says, yes, I've played back a quartile. Yes, I've played right to the end of the ad. And the ad server itself provides metrics. So you end up, the more you look as an engineer with more disparate, mismatched statistics that you can't align, and it becomes terrible. It's like going down Alice in Wonderland's hole. The more you look at it with your microphone or like a fractal, the more you realise they just don't match up. So, yes, I agree with you that I think actually everybody in the stack needs it. I mean, my clients are broadcasters, usually free to air, and they are absolutely desperate to prove that the ads have played. But as Jamie said, transparency is absolutely critical right the way through the value chain. So, yeah, I don't know, maybe Ofcom might want to look at it sometime.
Well, no, I'm sure we do. It's just that I can't comment on it.
No, I understand.
We have obviously a relationship with ASA on this, and I think.
Okay, thanks for that. There was another questioner at the back.
Yeah, it wasn't a question, it was more some feedback on the Alexa question. I vividly remember when I was being trained to be a cameraman.
Your microphone's off.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, the other way.
It says it's on.
Oh, it's supposed to show me out.
Do you want to
Hello?
try?
It's on now. It's related to the Alexa thing. I vividly remember when I was being trained to be a TV cameraman, the very first day in the studio, the floor manager pointed to a camera and said, "This is a camera. It's always on. It's always taking your picture." He then pointed to a microphone and he said, "This microphone and every other microphone in this studio is on and it's recording you." And it has never left me, that thought, because it's a way of thinking about these things that I'm sure a lot of people don't think about. So to me, an Alexa is just another of those things in a studio that's recording me.
In a reality TV studio, yeah.
Sorry, it's me, David again. I just add to that. There's a story which has it's maybe come back to be somewhat contemporary. You remember when is this on? Can you hear? Yeah. This microphone is on.
It's always on.
It's always on.
You remember that John Major was caught on tape comparing three of his cabinet colleagues as calling them bastards, and this was in a pre-interview bit. And there was I was actually on duty in the BBC control room that day, and they started to ramp up a leak inquiry. How could this have possibly got out? Until I pointed out this was a pool feed that was actually being broadcast across the Atlantic on an unencrypted satellite. So as soon as you say something into a microphone, you may as well be broadcasting it to the whole world, or at least you must assume that. But I just thought I just thought I'd share that nostalgic story now that Europe is back in fashion as a political debating point in the UK.
Great, okay. There's a gentleman in the middle of this row here. And then, were you? Okay. I apologise for my oversight. I'm looking in the wrong direction.
So let me first, my name is Albert Howells. I work for a company called Dividion. Let me first say how disappointed I am that I didn't get the McLaren ad. Clearly, I'm either in the wrong postcode or the wrong salary bracket, so I'm disappointed. So we talked about the creepy line lots. Obviously, the creepy line moves with time. You know, people used to put their telephone in a separate room because they didn't trust it, etc. So, you know, if you could give us a few insights on how you've seen the creepy line move and where it's going from here. And the other thing that I didn't hear much about was consent. So, you know,
Consent.
I keep consenting all the time with GDPR rules to different websites because I want to see the content. You know, we all consent to different things. How do you square the consent and the creepy line?
So who's that directed to? Any the whole panel?
Well, I think the first question on the moving, you know, we have one side, the rules, you know, GDPR and so on, coming in to try and protect, and on the other side you have the consumers becoming more and more used to giving away data. You know, maybe Simon could
talk about
touch on the line there.
Yeah,
the line is moving.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a line. It's a line in the sun. Not nothing more.
Yeah. It's an example I might have used actually when talking about I nearly put up the cool and creepy line, and where we are on that spectrum. And it is interesting, and I agree with you. It's changed over time. One of the examples that was always raised with me by Americans was the Google Waze. And when you start driving your car and it kind of knows where you're going, that can be, to even some Americans, quite creepy. And I know of 3 Americans on the West Coast who've actually given up using the service because they didn't like the fact that their car kind of knew where they might be going before they reached a significant point in the journey. So I think there is a cool and creepy line, and I agree actually with what Jamie said. I mean, it's often bounded. In the case of the car, of course, it is bounded. It's interesting, you know, you're actually in a car. This is where I drive. I drive normally to that place, and I start driving, and it assumes I'm going to go there, and people still find that creepy, and I'm interested to know why, but they do. And I think that some of us find some of the things that these devices do in the same way. But I think our forefather, I mean, my father, who's 90, finds the whole thing creepy. Literally, you know, I mean, it just won't talk to it at all. So it is utterly fascinating how generationally it's moved and how people now make the assumption everything I'm doing is being recorded. They're making that assumption. Years ago, people thought when they plugged their television, their Sky box into the telephone line, that Rupert Murdoch was wanting to know everything they were watching. They did. That's what they thought. And they found that creepy. And now, of course, with online, of course they know what you're watching. And most people today don't seem to be bothered by that because they actually, and that's why I use the word benign, they actually have a sense of what is benign and the generality of the public benefit of it. But there is a cool, creepy line, and I quite agree that some services go over it.
But it's moving.
It's moving. Oh, no. But is it moving, or are we moving it? Is it being redefined by society?
But you also suggested it's moving down the generation.
I am suggesting that. Yeah. I mean, that's my personal view. It's moving down the generations. Yeah.
There was a gentleman in the middle here.
Thank you. Martin Newton. I'm a civil servant in an unrelated area, but a member of the IET. Sticking with the creepy theme, and maybe just subtly changing it from the advertising to the content of the programming. We're all aware Theresa May's off in a few days, but she's long said about with the Russians, we know what you're doing. You're trying to influence our political spectrum, interfere in our democracy, those kind of things through content online, through social media. How do we, in the future, assure against, and this is probably more to the content provider sort of area, but maybe Ofcom would like to comment too, is how do we assure against programming being produced that has subtle messages to influence opinion and then being delivered to maybe particular parts of the electorate in order to influence elections, and we may not necessarily know who's financing or investing in those programs or interested in those outcomes.
I think you're going first, don't you?
It's quite a difficult one to answer. I think, so firstly, we are all regulated in terms of, all the broadcasters are regulated in terms of what content you can and cannot show at what times. Yeah. You also have to publish the content providers and the accounts that go alongside your content creation or content productions. I think, so, I think I'm not an expert on sort of the creative process. It's quite clearly not part of my remit. But for me, it comes back down to, one of the things that we do as a pay TV platform is we research on a monthly basis. We have 5,000 households that choose to issue or feedback on content and what they like and what they don't like, what they enjoy and what they don't enjoy. And that gives us, to some degree, this metric that we call a passion score, and that we measure not just Sky content but all programming. So it's a voluntary service that they take part in. And that allows us to understand what is working, what is not working, what is driving engagement, an appreciation, etc. And so in terms of comedy, the top two, this is not for public, but anyway, the top two comedy shows were Channel 4 shows, Fleabag and something else, I can't remember the other one. The top American show was, top American drama was Game of Thrones and something, Studio 19 or something 19. So we understand what is working. We understand what is driving consumer engagement. And that encourages us to move more towards, an area that's resonating or away from an arena or genre that is resonating. But the notion that as a transparent, audited, regulated, unlike a number of other countries, organisation and industry, that we would be funded by politically motivated, just strikes me as slightly unrealistic for the UK, given we are the most regulated broadcasting industry in the world.
I think I'd like to echo that. I mean, the regulation on the content side is superb. We also carry out regulation for other countries as well, actually. And the standards are, very carefully monitored, and we're all aware of cases where people have complained, and there's been investigations and decisions made and so forth. So that's not my team, but there are others who do this, and it's meticulous in the way that they do so. But you raised another issue, which was that of actually the way in which particular pieces of content can be pushed. And I think that's in the subtlest possible way, that is what I'm trying to allude to, in the sense of the way in which these engines work, and we need to be a bit more open about it and make sure that actually that people understand how they work, and that actually there is appropriate prominence given to the PSB services in the same way that there would be on conventional channels, which is really the purpose of the recommendations that Ofcom has now written to the government. So, that's the purpose of it, to make sure that actually we as a country effectively maintain the same standards in the online space, in TV, that we have had and enjoyed and used on the normal broadcast channels.
But for the fact that we don't have the standard yet.
When you say standard, you mean standard for measurement?
I mean also standards to control content management, because we know that contents are pushed through social media in very subtle ways, and a network of trolls constitutes a very, very good way to allude to avoid all the regulations existing.
Yeah, so I can only speak about today's presentation. I only talk about the TV space, which, as Jamie said, is highly regulated, and that is where we're focusing on. You're absolutely right. In the social media space, there is a different set of questions, and as you can see, government is currently working through how it's going to handle that.
Yeah, I don't think you can compare the general internet and social media with pay TV and OTT platforms, because it's comparing utterly different worlds. That there's completely different levels of control on them, and it's not random content that just anybody in the whole world could be putting up there and pushing. It's based on regulated content within the pay TV industry or the OTT industry, and using data that's based on the consumption on that particular platform, like Jamie was saying. So I think you can't really compare one with the other. And I think in terms of use of data and talking about changes that have happened over time, the advent obviously of GDPR was the first time in decades that the data privacy regulations had changed. And so it brought a step forward in the recognition of what data was being captured, how that data was being used, and putting more control back into the hands of the consumers, because up to that point there was no real knowledge or understanding of the value of the data that was being effectively given away. And now people have a lot more control, and you can see with whether it's fines that are coming out or it's much more focus on privacy and security, that there is a recognition over time that the data needs to be protected, that it's in the control of the consumer to ask to see their data. So if you wanted to, you could go and ask for all the data that's been held on you, no matter who that is, and whether that's voice that's been recorded or anything else, you can find that information out. And if you're in a regulated industry with trusted vendors and operators and so on, then you can rely on that data. And I know that from our perspective, we're obviously using data on viewing behaviour. In the run-up to GDPR, it was a bit like the run-up to Y2K in terms of fear and preparation. And we were certainly being asked, so what are we going to do about GDPR, and what are all these things that we're going to have to change? And for us, the answer was nothing needs to change from a ThinkAnalytics perspective, because you could already get your data back. You could already tell us to delete all the data that we were holding on you. So all of that is completely transparent. So I think we can't blur the lines between the general internet and a regulated pay TV environment.
And we will have another Cambridge Analytica scandal because.
But
that's not within the. It's not within the pay TV industry.
Yeah, we are talking about TV tonight.
Actually, something, it just reminded me of. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say we're running out of time, so.
Sure.
Well, I'm interested in.
Can you wait for the microphone?
Matt Atkinson from TiVo. I'm interested in understanding why it feels like a Peter Bonfield moment. He was the chief exec at BT years ago who said the internet won't take off. And it feels like the pay TV industry is burying itself in its head in the sand by saying the internet's going to be a separate part of the business and we're not going to be measured and monitored. And this is going to be the same business in a few years. Discuss.
Yeah, fair point. But yeah, we did. Shall we close there?
Go for that last question, yeah.
Last question. Okay.
Answer that one.
Yeah, answer that one. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that was the last question. So yes.
So I think you're conflating a number of issues. So the first is, will the internet eat the pay TV's lunch? The answer has been proven categorically no. And the reason why is because it's all about the viewer experience and the quality of content. Until the quality of content appears on Google or free-to-air or open access websites, then the internet will not win out. Now, that's not to say that content will not be delivered over the internet, and that can still be a pay TV experience. In fact, content is delivered over the internet daily from Sky, whether it be on the Now TV service or indeed on the on-demand service. It's about giving people the best customer choice and access to that content as quickly as possible. The point about keeping the two businesses separately, which is why I mentioned the conflation, is that I don't think it's right to offer Criteo retargeting, for example. There are other retargeting advertising companies out there that give a shit experience. I don't think it's right to offer that sort of targeting in a regulated environment where they have searched on Google for a light fitting or any other obscure product, and for me to chase them around the TV screen to offer them an advert at a higher rate. That is not a premium customer experience. That's when I talk about degrees of separation. Viewing experience and viewing data informing viewing experiences, not online search, unrelated environment to Sky that is on Amazon or on Google or on any other web shopping service. That's where I think I'm talking about video delivery. Yeah.
So online video And we know it's colliding. Sorry.
So we offer a service that is seamless across linear and satellite served as well as on demand. Yeah, and so that will continue. We offer advertising as a single campaign across multiple platforms, but it offers this.
But the regulation of the two environments. So there are other providers that are unregulated, and then there is your market, which is regulated.
Yep.
And until the two are joined together in some way, shape, or form, you're at a disadvantage.
And to be fair, that has been a clarion call from Sky and all of the other broadcasters for years, saying that we should not have, or you should have, a level playing field between platforms that broadcast and that are regulated and on-demand services, whether they be advertiser funded, like Facebook and YouTube, or whether they be subscription services. They should be regulated. If it includes advertising, it should be audited and monitored. It is not today. It is wrong. We need to hold ourselves to the same level of standards across all industries.
So I just I'd come back on that. As it is today, Ofcom's remit does not include that. And you know that. The government is considering how that should be regulated, and it would be inappropriate to speculate what they might choose to do. From our position, I hope you understand that.
I suggest this conversation could go on after the end of this session in front of everybody. I'd like to thank very much the audience for all their questions, and particularly our presenters, Jamie, Peter, Phil, and Simon, who've done a sterling job tonight and presented. There's not one of those presentations that I wouldn't want to take back to one of my students and say, you've got to do this, and we're going to do an assignment on it. So I hope that's a compliment. Thanks very much, guys. Thanks for the opportunity to be here at the IET. It's been a great experience. Thank you.